My name is Miss Deja, and I work at the Mono Arts Council. I'm the one who puts together those awesome art supplies for you, and I also teach Create with the Grades. I'm so excited to be back with you today to teach our next lesson, and we will be talking about the Japanese artist Hokusai, and we'll be learning about the Asian brushstroke technique. I do hope you're enjoying those art supplies. I hope you're enjoying our art classes, and please make sure to take care of the supplies because we will be reusing them again throughout the school year. But first, let's go over the art supplies that we'll need today, and then I will let you know what this class will be about. So first, we're going to need the green paintbrush that I provided for you in the art supplies. You'll also need black tempera paint that should be in that plastic container. You will need the sheet of white construction paper. We're going to be using it landscape, not portrait. So we're doing landscape. Okay, so make sure to put that straight down on your table. That will be hot dog and not hamburger. So we're doing landscape today. So put that over to the side. We'll also need a sheet of scrap paper to practice on. So that could be lined paper. You can use newspaper, a paper towel, some cardboard, any piece of paper you don't mind practicing on, so we can practice learning the Asian brushstroke technique. We will also need a little bit of water at the very end of the lesson. Just a few drops of water, not too much, but at the very end of the lesson. So make sure you have paintbrush, black tempera, the big white sheet of construction paper, and you'll also need a sheet of scrap paper to practice on. You can also use a practice worksheet. If you have that, you can also use paper towels, newspaper, cardboard, anything you don't mind practicing your painting on. And if you do not have the supplies for some reason, you can use a pencil. You can also use a black colored pencil, a black crayon, or a black marker, and any white sheet of paper to practice this lesson on. And as well, you will still need a piece of scrap paper. So what are we going to be learning about today? Well, today we'll be learning about the artist Hokusai, who was from Japan, and he's born in the 1700s, so almost 300 years ago. And we'll be learning about the Asian brushstroke technique. I will show you how to create the different brush strokes and how to hold your paintbrush in special ways to create the part of our paintings that we're going to need. So you're learning how to make these lines. There's also a special technique to hold your paintbrush to create the leaves, because we'll be creating a painting of bamboo. So we're going to make one stalk of bamboo. We're going to add some branches and leaves on there. And there's a special way to hold your brush for each part of the bamboo. All right, so I'll show you a little closer there. This is what we'll be creating today. So first, let's get to know Hokusai a little bit better. I will go over the art supplies before we start the lesson and at the end of the slideshow. But I'll first show you a slideshow of some pictures of Hokusai, some of his artwork, and also some examples of the Asian brushstroke technique. So let's take a look at that now. Hokusai is a Japanese artist from Japan. He was born in 1760. This is actually a self-portrait of Hokusai. And self-portraits, if you remember from our Frida Kahlo lesson, are when artists paint themselves or draw themselves. And this is a painting of Hokusai that he painted of himself when he was much older. Hokusai went by 30 different names, but his favorite one was Hokusai. That was the one he used most often. And Hokusai in Japanese means northern star. I don't know about you, but I only have a few nicknames that I go by. And if I had 30, that would be a lot to keep track of. And he moved over 100 times in his life. So that is a lot of packing and unpacking and telling one of your many nicknames that you have. But this is Hokusai. Hokusai was about your age when he first learned to paint. He was about 6 years old when he received his first paintbrush, and he started to paint on everything he could find. He would paint on rocks, he would paint on wood, he would paint on any paper he could find. He loved to paint, but he would practice painting the most to learn the Asian brushstroke technique was bamboo. So if you're not that well of a painter, or if you don't have much experience painting, we will practice just like Hokusai did by painting bamboo. And I will teach you the Asian brushstroke technique. So have no fear, you're going to do a great job. Now, Hokusai would start to make his own paintbrushes out of mouse whiskers, and he would use bamboo for the handle. So you might be able to get creative and use a cat or dog hair and some sticks that you find outside to create your own paintbrushes. And if you do, please let me know how that comes out. All right. So this is a picture of a teacher teaching students the Asian brushstroke technique. They're actually writing calligraphy. So you might recognize these symbols. People in Asian culture use calligraphy to write their alphabet. Now, in the Asian alphabet, they have over 40,000 symbols to learn. And for example, if you wanted to read a newspaper, you would need to learn 8,000 symbols just to read the newspaper. That is a lot to memorize. Luckily, we only have to learn 26 symbols for the capital letters in our alphabet. So that is quite a bit. This is Hokusai's most famous piece of work. This is the Great Wave at Kanegawa. And Hokusai loved to paint the nature that he saw all around Japan, the oceans, the rivers, and the mountains. But his favorite thing to paint was Mount Fuji, and that is what you see right in the back there. I do have a question for you. You can think about it for a moment. Do you think that this is a painting? Or do you think that this is a drawing? So I'll give you a moment to think about that. Well, for those of you who think that this is a drawing, you are correct. This is a drawing. So if for some reason you do not have the art supplies today and you're going to be using a pencil or a marker or a crayon, your pictures can come out just as good as any painting. I'm sure you'll do a great job. This is 36 Views of Mount Fuji. This was actually the cover of Hokusai's book where he collected all of his artwork. And so this is the collection of Hokusai's artwork. This is the cover of that collection. As I mentioned, he loved to paint the nature all around Japan, the hills, the trees, clouds, the mountains, and most importantly, Mount Fuji. You might notice that white space over on the left part of this picture. That is known as negative space to artists. So when we're creating our paintings of bamboo, don't worry about covering up the whole paper. That's okay if you leave a little bit of that white or negative space. That's okay in art. Don't worry about filling up the whole paper. This is a picture of a painting of bamboo and rocks, kind of like what we're going to be creating today. And there's a special technique of how you hold your paintbrush to create each part of the bamboo. I'm going to teach you that today. You might not notice that rocks are on the left part of this painting. There's also some calligraphy on the right. But pay attention to the bamboo. Bamboo is so special. It could be used in so many different ways. For those of you who ski or snowboard, you might notice that your skis, your ski poles, or your snowboard are sometimes made out of bamboo. Bamboo is very strong, but also can bend and is very flexible without breaking. So bamboo, when there is no wind, can stand up very tall and straight. But as soon as there's some wind, it will bend and flex in the wind without breaking. The leaves are also very graceful. And so I'm going to show you special techniques to express this characteristics of the bamboo. This is a close-up of the painting, and notice that there's each individual parts of the bamboo. So the stalk, the branches, and the leaves. So keep that in mind when we are painting our own painting today, that we want to express each part of the bamboo, each part of the stalk, each branch, and each leaf. And there's a special technique that we're going to show. We're going to learn to show this. This is an artist, and each picture shows you the steps of painting bamboo. We're going to start with the stalk. We're going to next paint the branches. We're going to end with the leaves. And lastly, we're going to color in the bamboo. This is a picture of bamboo and rocks once again. Bamboo is very useful and special in Asian culture. They use it to build houses, they use it to make furniture, and they also use it to eat. So if any of you have had ramen before, I love having ramen on a cold, snowy day in Mammoth. You can sometimes choose to have bamboo shoots put in your soup. So bamboo can be used in so many different ways to build and also to eat. This is a picture of different paintbrushes that artists use. Paintbrushes are typically made out of animal hair, such as wolf hair, and the handles are made out of bamboo. Unfortunately, our paintbrushes aren't that exciting. They're only made out of plastic and synthetic bristles. But I just wanted to show you an example of all the different kinds of paintbrushes that artists will use. And there's also some stamps at the bottom of the hanging brushes as well. So unfortunately, we won't be using stamps today, but I just wanted to show you the variety of art supplies that artists use. All right. Hokusai was painting up until his very last breath. He was 89 years old when he passed away. And on his tombstone, it says, "Old man crazy about art." So let's take another look at the Asian brushstroke technique and create our own paintings of bamboo inspired by Hokusai's artwork.
Okay, so let's start by practicing and learning the Asian brushstroke technique. I will go over the supplies one more time. You're going to need the green paintbrush that was provided for you in the art supplies, the black tempera paint. We'll also need the big white sheet of construction paper. We'll be using that landscape and not portrait. We're going to put that over to the side. And we're going to now be using our practice sheet or the scrap paper. So you can use a paper towel, some cardboard. You can also use newspaper, lined paper, or that practice worksheet if you do have that. So we'll be using our scrap paper to practice learning the Asian brushstroke technique. So I'm going to show you the special ways to hold your paintbrush to create these thin lines, which we'll use for the stalk of the bamboo and the branches. And we're going to learn a special technique for the leaves. So go ahead and take that little plastic cover off of the top of your paintbrush. Might be kind of hard to take off, so you might have to pull. And then you can take off the lid on your paint. We are only using paint right now. We will not be using water until later in the lesson. So I'll use water a little bit later. All right, so let's start with making these lines. Make sure you watch me first and then go ahead and practice afterwards. This is just an example so you can see what we'll be working on today. So to create these lines, we're going to hold your paintbrush like a pen or a pencil in our hands. So just like a pen or a pencil. If you are left-handed, it might look like that. But make sure you're holding it right at the bottom of the handle, bottom of that gold part, just before you touch the bristles. So right at the bottom of the handle, we're holding it just like a pen or a pencil. And that's so we have really good control over the paintbrush. So all we need is just a little bit of paint. You're going to dip just a tip of your bristles into the paint. Make sure to watch me first. So just dip the tip of your bristles in the paint, just the very tip there. We don't need too much paint on those bristles. And then you're going to touch the paper with just the tip of your bristles. And then you're going to lightly touch the paper and glide across to make these lines. Every time we make a new line, we're going to get just a little bit more paint. And if you feel like your lines are coming out too big or too thick, maybe use a little bit less paint. So lift your hand up just a little and just lightly dip your paintbrush into the paint. You don't want to press down too hard. Remember, we only need to paint on the very tip of our bristles. And when you touch the paper, gently touch the paper with just the tip of your bristles. We don't want to press down too hard. So if you think your lines are coming out too thick, lift your hand up just a little. And every time I make a new line, we're going to get just a little bit more paint. And make sure, try your best, and have fun. It's okay if it's not coming out like mine or anyone else's. This is our first time learning this technique. So just do your best and have fun. Remember, in the words of Bob Ross, there's no such thing as mistakes, only happy accidents. Make sure you're holding your paintbrush like a pen or a pencil at the very bottom of the handle, just before you touch the bristles. We're getting just a little bit of paint at the tip of your bristles, so right at the very bottom there. We don't need too much paint. And we're lightly touching the paper with just the tip of the bristles, not pressing down too hard and gliding your hand across the paper so that your lines come out very thin. And I'll show you my lines just a little bit closer. And so see, mine are different as well. So just try your best. Okay, so the next part, we are going to practice making the leaves. So let's practice a couple more lines before we move on to our leaves. Practice just a little bit more. Okay, I think we're ready. All right, and you don't have to make the same amount of leaves that I make. So for the leaves, we are now going to hold our paintbrush right where that grip is, that little squishy part. We're going to hold it right there. So if you have a different paintbrush, you might be holding it like in the middle of the handle, or holding it right in the middle of the handle here. For those who have the green paintbrush, where that grip is. We're going to dip just the tip of your bristles in the paint. Make sure to watch me first. Dip just the tip of the bristles in the paint, so not too much, just the very bottom here. This time, we're going to wipe off any extra paint on the edge of the container. I like to twist the handle between my fingers so I make sure I'm getting the paint, the extra paint, off of all the sides of the bristles. And I also want to make sure that my bristles come to a really nice point. All right. We're going to touch the paper with just the tip of your bristles, holding your paintbrush straight up and down. We're going to press down and flick. Press down, flick. Press down, flick. And I like to brush or flick the paintbrush towards myself. I make about 3 leaves before I get a little bit more paint. So go ahead and practice along and I will guide you. Make sure you're holding the paintbrush right where that grip is, or in the middle of your handle. Dip just the tip of your bristles in the paint. Remember, not too high. We just need a little bit of paint. Wipe off any extra paint that you have on the edge of the container. Wipe off any extra paint. Make sure it comes to that nice point. Remember, I like to twist my paintbrush in between my fingers. So I make sure I get all sides of the bristles. Comes to a nice point. Touch the paper with the tip of your bristles, holding your paintbrush straight up and down. Press down, flick. Press down, flick. Press down, flick. It's kind of like making little chicken feet. I've also had students say it looks kind of like dinosaur feet. Remember, I make about 3 leaves before I get a little bit more paint. So let's practice that a few times before we move on to our painting. I'm going to practice that. This is the only time we're going to be pressing down. So remember, you're like sweeping the paintbrush along the paper or sweeping it towards yourself. Make sure you're wiping off any extra paint. We're holding the paintbrush right in the middle of the handle. Make sure that comes to a nice point. Touch the paper with the tip of your bristles. Press down, flick. Press down, flick. Press down, flick. All right, so let's practice that a couple more times. Making sure we're taking off any extra paint, wiping that off on the edge of the container. You want to come to that nice point. Right. Make one more set, and then I think we're ready to move on to the painting. So remember, we're just practicing on the practice sheet of paper right now. Okay, I'll show you mine just a little bit closer so you can see how they look. Kind of like little chicken feet. dinosaur tracks. When we're done with that, go ahead and make one more set of leaves. And then go ahead and move your practice sheet of paper over to the side. And grab your big white sheet of construction paper, because we are now going to start our painting. Remember, try your best and have fun. We're learning something new today. So don't worry about your painting looking like mine or anyone else's. Just make sure to try your best, and it will always be more than good enough. So this is another example of what we'll be painting today. We're going to start with the bamboo stalk. So make sure you leave some space between each shoot. We're going to paint these rectangles going all the way up the paper. Then we're going to paint the branches next. Make sure you leave some space between the branches. Then we're going to end with the leaves. And lastly, we'll be painting the inside of the bamboo. All right, so I'll guide you through each technique. We're going to start at the bottom of the paper here. And we're going to start with that first technique again. So make sure you are holding your paintbrush at the bottom of the handle. So right before we touch the bristles, we're holding right at the bottom of that gold part. Right before you touch the bristles. If you're left-handed, it might look like this. Okay, just like a pen or a pencil, we're holding it at the bottom of the handle. So we have a lot of control. Go ahead and dip just the tip of your bristles in the paint. And this time, remember, we only need a little bit of paint at the very bottom. We don't need too much. Go ahead and watch me first. So we're going to make these rectangles going all the way up the paper. And yours can be bigger or smaller than mine. So don't worry about that. I'm going to make mine a little larger so that you can easily see what I'm painting. But watch me first, because I want to show you how I leave a little bit of space in between each stalk. So we're just going to paint these rectangles going all the way up the paper. Make sure that you leave a little bit of space in between each shoot. And every time we make a new line, we're going to grab just a little bit more paint on the tip of our bristles. We're not pressing down too hard. If you feel like your lines are too thick, make sure to use a little bit less paint, so don't press too much into the paint, and also lift your hand up just a little. So go ahead and start making your bamboo stalks now. So we're holding the paintbrush at the bottom of the handle right before we touch the bristles, so at the bottom of the gold. Dip just the tip of your bristles in the paint, not too much paint, just at the very bottom there. And then make some rectangles or the shoots of the stalk going all the way up the paper. You can make more shoots or less, that's up to you. We're just going to be making one shoot going all the way up the paper. And every time we get a little bit more paint, we are going to, or every time we make a new line, we're going to grab just a little bit more paint. So go ahead and practice making those shoots going all the way up your paper. Remember, if your lines are coming out too big, maybe use a little bit less paint. I'm going to go all the way up the paper. Make sure to try your best, have fun. If you make any happy accidents, that's okay. Just keep trying. I'm going to go all the way to the top. And every time I make a new line, grab just a little bit more paint. Next, we're going to be painting the branches of the bamboo. So we'll be doing that next. So for that, we're still going to be holding our paintbrush at the very bottom of the handle, just like a pen or a pencil. So for that, make sure to watch me first and then follow along afterwards. The branches are going to start from between each shoot of the bamboo stalk. So I'll show you the example here. just like so. So we're going to start it from the space that we left between each rectangle. Make sure for the branches that you're leaving some space in between each part of the branch so we could show each part of the bamboo. Okay? Let's go ahead and dip just the tip of your bristles into the paint. Make sure just the very bottom there. We want it to come to a really nice point. Watch me first and I'll let you know when to follow along. And we're going to make these lines by lightly touching the paper. I don't want to press down too hard. Every time you make a new line, you want to grab just a little bit more paint. Go ahead and start practicing now. Hold that paintbrush at the very bottom of the handle just before you touch the bristles. Make sure to grab just a little bit of paint at the very tip of your bristles. And then start making the lines for your branches, leaving some space between each branch. You can make as many branches as you'd like. I'm going to start on this right side, and then I'll make some on the left. Make sure you leave that space in between each branch. And if you think your lines are coming out too thick, lift your hand up just a little and maybe use a little less paint. Remember, lightly touching the paper with just the tip of the bristles. We don't want to press down too hard. Every time you make a new line, get just a little bit more paint. And your painting does not have to look like mine. You can just make it your own. All right. Next, we're going to paint the leaves. So I'll give you just a moment to finish up with the branches. For the leaves, we want to start by holding the paintbrush right in the middle of your handles, right where that grip is. You hold it right in the middle of the handle. For the leaves, you're going to dip the tip of your bristles into the paint. Remember this time, wipe off any extra paint that you have on the edge of the container. So go ahead and wipe off that extra paint by twisting the handle between your fingers. And make sure it comes to that nice point. Go ahead and watch me first. Find one of the ends of your branches. Touch the paper with the tip of your paintbrush. Press down, flick. Press down, flick. Press down, flick. And we're flicking towards ourselves. But you can make this painting your own. So go ahead and start making your leaves now, holding the brush right in between the end of each end of the brush, right where that grip is. Touch just the tip of your bristles into the paint. Wipe off any extra paint that you have by twisting the handle between your fingers. So make sure you get all the extra paint off. Make sure it comes to that nice point. Find one of the ends of your branches. Touch the paper with the tip of your bristles by holding your paintbrush straight up and down. Press down, flick. Press down, flick. Press down, flick. All right. Make as many leaves as you like. Remember, I like to make about 3 before I get a little bit more paint. Make sure you wipe off any extra paint. We're holding the paintbrush right where that grip is. Touch the paper with the tip of your bristles. Press down, flick. Press down, flick. Make about 3 leaves before I get just a little bit more paint. Remember, we only need paint on the very tip of your bristles. Wipe off that extra paint. All right. So now that we're done with our leaves, and you can make as many leaves as you like, we're going to take that paint and put it over to the side, because now we're going to paint the inside of the bamboo. So kind of like how this one looks here with the shading. So we can create some shadows. We're going to do the same thing in our own painting. So I like to get just a little bit of water. I'll put that in the lid of my plastic container. You can also use a cup with a little bit of water, but you don't need too much water, just a few drops of water. So I'm just going to put a little bit in that little circle there on the lid. We need just a little bit of water, not too much. Just a few drops in the cap there. We're not using any more paint. So no more paint, because you already have paint in your bristles. So we're going to keep holding our paintbrushes just like a pen or a pencil on the grip there in the middle part of the handle. Dip your bristles into the paint, and I like to turn the brush around on my fingers so I make sure I get water all around. And then we're going to paint half of each shoot. So we're going to paint like little triangles inside. We're only painting half because we want to give it some shading. Grab just a little bit more water every time you paint inside of one of the shoots, and paint about half. So it's kind of like watercoloring, but we're using the water to lighten the paint. Remember, no paint, we're only using water because we already have paint on the handle, on the bristles, forgive me. Okay. Painting like triangles on the inside. Okay. All right, thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you for our next lesson.